We have grandparents that are grieving. We have cousins that are grieving. We have schoolmates that are grieving. Um, Keep that in mind as you're making your comments. He was just this, again, the sweetest, funniest person that you could ever meet, and um, she was a light in her community, a light in her family's lives. I would ask people to keep in mind that Mandy was a real person, um, and she had a family that loved her and that misses her.
For years, Amanda Karolkiewicz poured her thoughts into Reddit. She wasn't trying to make headlines. She wasn't building an audience. She was simply looking for advice from strangers as she struggled to hold her family together. Those posts sat quietly online, buried among thousands of others, until tragedy struck. Then, almost overnight, they resurfaced. People began reading them with an entirely different perspective, searching for clues that might explain one of the most devastating family tragedies Michigan has seen in recent years. Today, we're taking a closer look at those posts, not to claim they explain everything, because investigators have not reached that conclusion, but because they offer a rare, deeply personal glimpse into the challenges Amanda described years before the tragedy. As always, this report is based on publicly available information, and where facts remain unknown, we'll make that clear. When authorities responded to a house fire in Grand Haven Township, they discovered an unimaginable scene. 8 members of the Karolkiewicz family had died inside the home. Following their investigation, officials concluded that Amanda and the couple's 6 children were homicide victims, while Kristopher Karolkiewicz died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Investigators also believe multiple fires were intentionally set inside the home after shootings. While the investigation into the motive remains ongoing, attention quickly shifted to Amanda's online writings. The Reddit account believed to belong to Amanda wasn't filled with dramatic accusations or sensational claims. Instead, it documented years of frustration, heartbreak, self-doubt, and hope. Reading through the posts feels less like following a crime story and more like reading someone's private journal. Someone trying to understand whether her marriage could survive. One of the most striking details Amanda shared was how the relationship began. She explained that she met Kristopher while she was an intern, and he was older, divorced, and in a position of authority. At the time, she believed they had built a loving life together. They married, raised 6 children, and from the outside appeared to have a kind of large, close-knit family many people admired. But years later, according to Amanda, the very beginning of their relationship became a painful source of reflection. She wrote that Kristopher had become emotionally involved with another intern. To Amanda, the similarity was impossible to ignore. She described feeling as though history had repeated itself. Only this time she was a wife watching unfold instead of the young woman at the beginning of the relationship. According to her posts, discovering what she believed was an emotional affair changed everything. Amanda described months of questioning herself. She wondered whether she had somehow failed as a wife. She questioned her appearance, her decisions, and even her worth. Looking back years later, she admitted she had spent far too much time blaming herself for another person's choices. That self-blame became one of the strongest themes throughout her writing. She explained that recovering from betrayal wasn't simply about deciding to forgive. Instead, she described it as a daily struggle to rebuild confidence and trust while carrying emotional wounds that never seemed to fully heal. What makes these posts especially heartbreaking today is that Amanda wasn't writing from a place of anger alone. Again and again, she talked about wanting to save her family. She wrote about counseling. She wrote about trying to communicate better. She wrote about choosing to stay because 6 children depended on both parents. Even when she questioned whether the marriage could ever fully recover, she continued searching for ways to make it work. One of the questions many people are asking now is simple. Why didn't she leave? Amanda addressed that herself. She explained that leaving wasn't an easy decision when 6 children were involved. Starting over would mean enormous financial, emotional, and practical challenges. She wanted stability for her children, if reconciliation was still possible. That doesn't necessarily mean she believed everything was fine. Instead, her post suggests she hoped years of counseling and hard work might eventually rebuild what had been broken. Still, the trust never fully returned. Amanda repeatedly described moments when old memories resurfaced unexpectedly. Something as simple as a conversation or change in behavior could bring back fears she thought she had already overcome. She wrote that what she needed most was reassurance and honesty. Instead, she often felt that difficult conversations ended with defensiveness, leaving her feeling isolated even while trying to repair the marriage. It's important to pause here and separate what Amanda experienced from what investigators have concluded. Her Reddit posts document her personal perspective on years of marital struggles. They do not establish why the killings occurred, nor have investigators identified the affair or the issues she described as the motive behind the tragedy. At this point, those questions remain unanswered. However, the posts do provide context about the emotional challenges she believed her family had been facing long before the events that shocked the nation. And as we continue, those writings reveal even more about the warning signs Amanda believed she had overlooked, the red flags she later described, and why so many readers now believe those forgotten Reddit posts have become one of the most significant windows into the family's life before everything fell apart. As more of Amanda's Reddit posts came to light, readers noticed that they weren't centered around a single argument or one isolated event. Instead, they painted the picture of marriage that, in her own words, had been under strain for years. The affair was only one chapter in a much longer story, one that included counseling, repeated attempts to rebuild trust, and an ongoing struggle to move forward while feeling that the past was never truly behind them. One phrase that appeared repeatedly throughout her writing was red flags. Amanda reflected on her relationship with the benefit of hindsight. Looking back, she wrote that there were warning signs she believed she had overlooked early in the relationship. She described moments of dishonesty, secrecy, and behavior that made it difficult for her to feel secure. At the time, she either explained those moments away or convinced herself they could be worked through. Years later, she questioned whether she had ignored those concerns because she wanted the relationship to succeed so badly. It's a feeling many people who have experienced betrayal can relate to. When someone is committed to making a relationship work, warning signs can sometimes seem easier to rationalize and confront. Amanda's post suggests that she wrestled with that realization long after the emotional affair had come to light. She also wrote openly about therapy. According to her posts, counseling wasn't a short-term effort. It became part of their lives for years. She described attending both individual and couples therapy, hoping that honest conversations would slowly rebuild what had been damaged. But healing, she explained, wasn't as simple as showing up to counseling sessions. She wrote that whenever she tried to express lingering fears or ask difficult questions, she often felt the conversations became defensive instead of reassuring. From her perspective, the emotional distance remained, even when they were trying to work toward reconciliation. One of the more revealing parts of her writing wasn't about what happened between them, but about how it affected her personally. Amanda admitted that for a long time she blamed herself. She questioned whether she had somehow become less attractive. She wondered whether she had failed as a wife. She even described losing confidence in herself because she couldn't understand why the relationship had changed. Eventually, though, her outlook began to shift. Through therapy and self-reflection, she wrote that she realized another person's decisions were not something she could control. She described slowly rebuilding her confidence and learning to separate her own worth from the choices someone else had made. That personal growth became another recurring theme in her posts. Amanda also shared that she stopped drinking alcohol during this period of her life. She explained that she wanted to face her emotions clearly rather than trying to escape them. According to her writing, the decision improved both her mental and physical well-being, and she hoped it would help her become a stronger mother to her children. Even during her most difficult moments, the children remained at the center of nearly every decision she described. She frequently mentioned how much she loved being their mother. She acknowledged that raising 6 children was exhausting, expensive, and often overwhelming, but she also made it clear that they were the reason she continued fighting for marriage for as long as she did. Reading those words today is especially emotional because the children were such a constant presence throughout her posts. They weren't mentioned as an obligation or burden. They were described as a reason she kept believing things could improve. As these writings spread across social media after the tragedy, many people began asking the same question. Were these posts warning signs? The answer is more complicated than many headlines suggest. Looking back after tragedy, it's natural for people to search for clues that seem obvious in hindsight. But it's important to remember that hindsight often creates patterns that weren't necessarily clear at the time. Amanda's Reddit posts undoubtedly reveal a marriage facing serious challenges. They document betrayal, emotional pain, years of counseling, and lingering trust issues. But they do not describe plans for violence, nor do they indicate that she believed such a tragedy would occur. Investigators have also not stated that the Reddit posts explain the motive behind the killings. That distinction matters. It's understandable why people have connected the posts to the case. They offer a deeply personal account from someone who can no longer speak for herself. But connecting those experiences directly to motive without evidence risks turning personal reflections into conclusions that investigators themselves have not reached. At the same time, the timing of everything has raised additional questions. Public records and reporting show that Kristopher's employment ended only weeks before the tragedy. Authorities have confirmed that fact, but they have not linked it to the motive. Even so, many observers have noted that the combination of long-term marital difficulties described in Amanda's posts and major life changes shortly before the killings has fueled widespread speculation online. For investigators, however, speculation is not evidence. Their focus remains on forensic findings, digital evidence, interviews, and any material that can establish exactly what happened inside that home and why. And while the internet continues trying to piece together the story from Amanda's years-old Reddit posts, detectives are still searching for answers that only the evidence can provide. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire case is that Amanda's Reddit posts were never meant to become evidence in the court of public opinion. They were written years before the tragedy, during moments when she was looking for guidance, reassurance, and support from strangers who had experienced similar struggles. She could have known that one day millions of people would read those words while trying to understand what happened to her family. Today, those posts have become one of the most discussed aspects of the investigation. Some people believe they contain overlooked warning signs. Others see them as the story of a woman who was doing everything she could to save her marriage. The truth may be more complicated than either conclusion. What we know is that Amanda wrote honestly about betrayal, counseling, rebuilding trust, and an emotional way to try and keep a family together. She described years of working through difficult emotions while remaining committed to her children. Those writings offer an intimate look at her perspective, but they're still only one part of a much larger story. What we don't know is equally important. Investigators have not announced a definitive motive for the killings. They have not said the affair described in Amanda's posts led to the tragedy. They have not concluded that the marital problems documented on Reddit explain what happened inside that home. Those are questions the investigation is still attempting to answer through forensic evidence, digital records, and witness interviews. In cases like this, it's easy for social media to fill the gaps with theories. When people are searching for answers, every old post, photograph, or comment can suddenly seem significant. But investigators have to follow evidence, not assumptions. Even so, Amanda's words continue to resonate because they remind us that behind every headline is a real family with years of history that the public never saw. Long before the news cameras arrived, long before investigators released their findings, she was already writing about pain, hope, disappointment, and a difficult decision to keep trying. Whether those writings ultimately prove relevant to the motive remains to be seen. For now, they stand as a deeply personal record of a woman navigating challenges she believed could still be overcome. As the investigation continues, perhaps the most responsible approach is to separate confirmed facts from unanswered questions. The evidence tells investigators how the tragedy unfolded. Amanda's Reddit posts tell us how she experienced her marriage. Those are not the same thing, but together they provide important context as authorities continue searching for the answers that her family, their community, and the public are still waiting to hear.